Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. It is, of course, November, which means there's probably a month and a half left in 2025. But I've gone into casual denial about that. So we're going to talk about some horror stories, some ghost stories with Dr. Derek Lee and pretend that it's still October. Derek, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Daniel.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm currently an assistant professor of English at Wake Forest University, and I guess but the primary areas that I was hired to do 20th century American, and what I've taught and done research in the past couple of years has been specifically around science fiction, fantasy, some Asian American literature, graphic novel, and I guess especially pertaining to what we're talking about today, I've done a lot of supernatural work. And I came out with a book earlier this year. It's called Parascientific Revolutions. It's a cultural and theoretical history of the paranormal. So I've been thinking about the supernatural and weird stuff for quite a while. And so it's kind of infiltrated both the work I do in my scholarship and what I have my students do in the classroom.
Awesome. So, how do you get students interested in the paranormal or ghost stories?
Well, I do teach a class called The Ghost. It is a gen ed class, and it's like one of those classes that just uh, all the spots disappear almost immediately. I think some word has been passed around about what we do, but the thing is I feel you don't really have to you don't have to do much to get people interested in the supernatural or in ghosts. It's one of those subject matters that people are almost naturally gravitate towards. Something that I've seen in this class is that you know people in my class have seen ghosts. Their family members have seen ghosts. They've all heard a good ghost story. And so when a class appears on the college listings where you get to study them and think about them, I think people naturally gravitate towards that, and they want to know more about, are ghosts real? If they're not real, what do they symbolize? What are the best ghost stories that are in our culture? And I think the class that I teach, which is called The Ghost, tries to touch on several or on all of those ideas.
So, as a culture or as a society, what do you think draws people to the supernatural?
I think um, I think the supernatural is almost ahistorical and acultural. And I say that because basically every single culture has ghosts. Like, no matter whether we think about like Western society or Eastern society, everyone has these ideas of spirits or entities that exist beyond the living. I think that the idea that we are haunted by things in the past, that we've experienced certain individual traumas or cultural traumas, and that those echoes reverberate into the future. I think this is very powerful stuff. And I think also because the fact that we live in a very hyper scientific society that has outlawed so much of the supernatural, and that this is something that you should not, you can't like really study, or like if you saw something that's just your imagination, and yet the fact that people see strange things and have dreams all the time that they cannot explain, it resonates. And I think like people want explanations, or at least want to at least like cogitate upon it a little bit further. And ghost stories allow you to do that. It's almost like a pushback against this hyper modern, hyper scientific society that we live in.
Yeah, and I think ghost stories give us like one avenue to explore, like what happens after, we're finished here on this plane of existence, and it just, gives people another possible answer. Like, does it end? Where do we go? All these are questions, and we're still looking for the answer. And, people have been around for thousands, probably going on close to a million years, give or take. But it's still a question that we're trying to answer as a society.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, other cultures have more definitive ideas. So, my mom grew up in Rangoon, Burma, And ghosts are not these outlawed entities in her culture as it is in, say, Western modern society. I mean, she taught me growing up that based on your karma after you die, like if you have a good life, you will return as like in a higher, better form. But if you lived a poor life, you might come back as a ghost and like kind of replay. I guess like if there's some sort of emptiness in your life or something that you're craving, you come back as a ghost because and try to make things right. Or like if you're really bad, I guess you come back in a lower form of life, like a housefly or something like that. And so in different societies, there are different belief structures about what happens after death. And so certainly, like Western society is obviously wrestling with that idea. We don't know what happens in the great beyond, but other cultures have thought about that and have their own theories.
Yeah, and it's, still an ongoing question. Like people are using science to try to prove the answers now. Like everyone has their own like ghost hunting techniques or equipment that did you hear that? So, what ghost stories resonate with your students? I assume when you teach a class like this, you give them real world examples. Like, what are some that they become attached to?
Well, I guess like when I teach my class the ghost, we move through several different types of ghost story genres. So I guess like just to give some background for this class. So in this class, it's almost like an exploration of literary ghosts from 1600s to the present. And so like the first category I call or what I call the real ghost stories. And we'll start off with Hamlet, which is Hamlet's father is the most famous ghost in literature, and he's a real ghost. He literally appears. Multiple people see this figure, and I give some historical background that in the pre-modern era, ghosts, fit into this supernaturally inflected world where angels, demons, and gods are all entities that occupy our world. And then we move from the real ghosts into the psychological ghost section. And there I talk about with the rise of science and the rise of psychology, you can kind of explain away ghosts. Ghosts are not real entities that appear before you, but a figment of your imagination. And as we learn more about psychology, you can say, oh, this is someone's guilty conscious creating a hallucination. It is someone's guilt or some trauma that is replaying into them. And so, like in the psychological ghost section, we'll read Turn of the Screw. Let's see, what are some other examples of that text, of that section? We'll do the yellow wallpaper. We actually watch Fight Club because Tyler Durden is a psychological projection. And after that, we'll move into ethnic ghosts. So we'll look at Beloved. I also teach the movie Candyman. And so those are ghosts of racial traumas. And in the last section of the class, we will do something called technological ghosts, where the idea that technology haunts us in some way. And so we'll watch a movie like Upgrade or read Neuromancer with like AI entities. And I'd say of those ghost stories, the ones that have really resonated with my students, I think, are the psychological ghosts. I think maybe because like many of them are future pre-med students, people who want to go to the sciences, and so they tend to laugh at the idea that ghosts are real entities. I think like they've grown up in a culture in a scientific culture where ghosts are not real, and so they like the idea that a ghost is I guess like a sign of a problematic mind. It is guilt personified or trauma personified, and so it can be explained away. But they also like the idea that a lot of these stories, like Turn of the Screw or the picture of Dorian Gray, they don't quite, they can't quite be. I guess like there's some ambiguity there. I think students like that sort of ambiguity, and so I think when I think about the stories in that section, which is Dorian Gray, Turn of the Screw, Fight Club, the Yellow Wallpaper, those ghost stories really strike a chord with my students because it fits into this uneasy gray area of like, is this real? Certainly, like phenomenologically, I think it's real, but like the person across the next to me can't see the ghost. So, um, I think those are the ghost stories in terms of fiction that resonate. I can also answer your question in a different way because I have a really fast, I guess like one of my, is it my first or second? One of the major projects in my class is when I have students tell their own ghost stories. And I think maybe this is maybe what you're getting at, like what are the ghost stories that resonated with students there? And I think like this is a kind of a class favorite because the project is, go talk to your family members, go talk to your friends from your hometown, and find out a ghost story that has been passed down in your area. And the fascinating thing is, I've taught this class going on 4 to 5 years. I have yet to come across a repeated story. That tells me that like every single family, every single town, every region in America has its own ghosts, and there are people who are seeing this, having some sort of unexplainable phenomena out there. And I had the students recreate that story as a podcast. And so I bring in someone from the library. They teach them Audacity. They teach them how to layer sounds into their ghost stories. And they kind of have to retell these ghost stories as campfire tales. And so, like, you can put down a track of like crackling fire, and then you can start talking in a moody voice. And as like the story gets into it, you can have like rattling chains or moans in the background or like wind whistling through the trees. And students get really into their own stories. I think I have students from across the country, from Pennsylvania. There's a lot of students here from the South, and there's a lot of like Civil War ghost stories, and like all those stories have some sort of historical echoes about bloodshed in the past or lost loves and stuff like that. And I think like that really captivates students.
And that's, you've given me something interesting to think about. I've never thought about ghost stories as not necessarily a coping mechanism, but something along those lines to help people, relate to past trauma, maybe understand and maybe even heal from past trauma. And that's something a lot of historians and historical sites are looking at as part of the narrative now, as not necessarily therapy, like I was saying, but something to help bridge the way to greater understanding, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think like ghost stories are, I think they're fascinating because like contained within them is like the kernels of every society's like moral values, its histories, what's right and wrong. I mean, we start off the year with Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And like one of the first stories I tell is what I have them read is The Hook. Now, The Hook is not a ghost story per se because it doesn't have a. By the way, for people who don't know, The Hook story is, a guy and a girl are on a mountaintop making out, and then like there's like the radio breaks in and says like there's an escaped serial killer with a hook running around the neighborhood, and so the girl immediately wants to go home. The guy says, "No, let's stay out here and keep making out." And then they hear something in the bushes, and then the girl says, "We have to go home right now." And so the boyfriend like tears out of the area, really mad. And then like when he drops her off, there's like a bloody hook on the on the door of the car. And so uh, uh, I teach that first because I tell them the ghost stories are morality tales. And so it's really important for them to know that the boy and the girl were thinking about having premarital sex on that mountaintop. And it was the girl's chastity that saves them from getting hooked to death. And so, we talk about, when did this story get passed around? What are our social mores around sex before and after marriage? And certainly, like in all the ghost stories we read after that, we talk about, well, what is this saying about right and wrong behavior at the time? So, for example, if you look at the turn of the screw, the governess is seeing a ghost, and it's it might be in her mind, it might be real, and one of the major theories is that she is having these like really passionate desires for the for her boss, for the owner of Bly. And so the ghost is a psychic projection of her passion, and it's an illicit passion because she's the governess. You should not be having a sexual desire for someone of a higher class than you. Um, and so, I guess embedded in these in these not short stories, but in these ghost stories are kind of indicators about what our society thinks is correct and incorrect thought, what is correct and incorrect behavior. So I think like to your point, I think like there is a lot of information baked into these stories that we try to tease out.
Yeah, and that's something I have noticed in stories like the Headless Horseman and Sleepy Hollow is one of my personal favorites. I've loved that one since I read it in middle school or high school. And then they showed us the original Disney version that came out in like the 1950s, 1960s. The animation was really dated, but it's like trying to teach you respect for local traditions or something. And then the newer version that was directed by Tim Burton and had Johnny Depp in it tried to show you that there was like an explanation for everything, like
Yeah.
follow the clues and find the answer, even if you have numerous fainting spells along the way.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about ghost stories is that they're constantly transforming and like you come up with a new movie, a new version, and it speaks to a new audience and it speaks to a new era. I was actually doing a little background research because I mentioned that I teach Candyman, and I was wondering, oh, what is the original genesis of that movie? And so I think like the main core ghost story that's based on is the Bloody Mary ghost story. And like if you go back far enough, the idea was that back in I don't know like 17, 1800s, the idea was if a young lady wanted to know who they would marry, they could hold up a mirror and hold a candle and then walk up the stairs backwards. And if you did that, the image of your future husband would appear in the mirror. So it was basically an act of divination. However, if you saw a skull instead of your future husband's face, it meant that you would die before you ever got married. And so this act of divination then has like this supernatural scary element, and this transformed into the more common Bloody Mary myth where you stand with a group of people in front of a mirror and then you call out the name Bloody Mary, I don't know, 3 or 5 times, and then she appears before you, and then can either, give you future news or more likely is a premonition of your death. And then the 1990s version by Bernard Rose comes out, and the Bloody Mary myth, moves from white upper class society into the Chicago inner city. And Candyman, is somewhat you say Candyman in front of the mirror, and then this figure who is basically a symbol of the traumas of slavery, the traumas of black poverty, appears and kills you. And then like there's the 2000 something update where he becomes the ghost of urbanization and urban renewal. So you can see in each iteration, it contains the concerns and the fears of the anxieties of a period and a place. So it starts off with like wanting to know who you're going to marry, and by the end we're looking at what's happening with the redevelopment in Chicago in the 2000s. So really weird transformation, and like it's the flexibility of ghost stories that make them so amazing.
So, um, you have students write their own ghost stories. How, like, say somebody wants to research ghost stories in their local area, what would you recommend for them?
So I think the first thing you do, I have them obviously talk to their friends and their family. You'll be surprised how many people have family members or they themselves have seen a ghost, and so that's actually the best. Like that's sort of primary research. If I have students who have been to a haunted campsite and like can recreate every single detail. Um, Many of people have an aunt and uncle who have had a like, unexplainable experience, and then talking to them on the phone for like an hour, half an hour. That always generates incredible material, like really rich detail. Um, for those students who haven't had too much, they're often almost like there's a ghost series like Haunted America or something like that. It has basically ghost stories collected from every single region of the country. And I often point students in that direction. Like you will find something in your area if you just if you research that Haunted America series, and then like put your own flavor into it. Create new characters so that you're just not retelling the exact same story. And worst comes to worst, do an internet search. If you type in like ghost stories, Winston-Salem, like you will find 4 or 5, and then I used to actually have we have a haunted house tours here in Winston-Salem, and so like I used to take my students to that haunted house tour. And if you could go to that house, take pictures of it, do some site research, those are the cool details that can inform your own ghost story. And at the end of the day, it is creative writing. So as much as you can put in all those factual details or historical details, like you really just need to get into the minds of those characters. Imagine you're there. How would you react? How would you feel? How would your voice sound like if you were to see a ghost, and try to put that sort of personality into your own tales.
That's actually something that just crossed my mind how cathartic this process of writing your own ghost story could be. Like, as academics, we usually have like a very thick wall, like, especially when we publish something, like, not to sound too outrageous, but this kind of gives you an opportunity to stretch your wings a little bit and, you know, grow that imagination.
Exactly. I mean, just like from academic points, I mean, I think like talking to a family member is research. Like doing site, uh, taking pictures and like writing down details of, this haunted house that's in downtown is a type of research. And so it's certainly like one of the things that has been part of my own research agenda has been to break down that wall between, the natural and the supernatural, the scientific and the pseudoscientific. And so the book I wrote, Parascientific Revolutions, um, is um, is basically making it's basically a cultural and theoretical history of the paranormal, and I'm looking at how paranormal ideas have transformed over the 20th century as the paranormal moved out of parapsychology and has been informed by new sciences like quantum physics and microbiology, and also how it's moved into new literary genres from beyond Victorian ghost stories into science fiction, into ethnic fiction. And the main thing I think like maybe for academic audiences, the thing that I'm trying to say is that there is a rich history and a rich intellectual body of knowledge and archive. I guess like, yeah, I guess not an archive, but basically there's a rich body of information that we've ignored if we don't pay attention to the supernatural. If everything that is called paranormal is outlawed from academic study, you're not paying attention to, people's lived experiences. You're not paying attention to Eastern conceptions of ghosts. You're not paying attention to the odd phenomena that cannot be explained. And that doesn't mean we have to believe all of it and that we're going to try to explain all of it, but this stuff is fair game to study. I think for a long time, um, this stuff like, you could not write about it. Like certainly in a lot of what I say, a lot of what I research is that there's been a huge bias against parapsychology in the sciences, and so even if someone has rigorous research, they'll get desk rejections because it's not taken seriously. And in the humanities, it's still not well developed. I think obviously the paranormal and the supernatural is weird, but at least there is a history of the occult. A lot of the occult societies, like the Theosophical Society, the Order of the Golden Dawn, I think all that stuff it has a historical basis, which allows humanists to do research on. And so I guess like what I was trying to do is just bring that into the 20th century, not just like say that there's a stopping point at midway in the 20th century when parapsychology was not believed in, or its results cannot be replicated. And so you could either say, well, if the science can't be replicated, we don't need to pay any attention to this. But there have been all sorts of like writers and thinkers and philosophers who have continued thinking about how the paranormal and ghosts and telepathy, telekinesis could still happen. And a lot of writers are obviously fascinated with that. And I think this is a body of knowledge in both the humanities and the sciences that's worth digging into more.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And that's something that archaeology, strives to do also. There's always more to find. And just because someone tells you it isn't worth pursuing doesn't mean that they're right.
Right. And actually, maybe I'd be interested to know, like, are there archaeologists of the supernatural? Are there sociologists of the supernatural? I'd be interested to know, like, what, how you see your field and its related fields, like, looking into the paranormal.
Well, that's again something that I think people, especially archaeologists, we have so little left behind that, we never disregard an explanation for something like, oh, this little piece of something has been here for, 10,000 years. Was it put here? Sure. Could it have fallen out of somebody's pocket? Sure. There's always an explanation. And again, you can't discount any explanation just because you don't have all the evidence or all the facts for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, looking into, I mean, we live in a world of information, misinformation, conspiracy theories, and I think like the academy is coming around to the import of these things. Certainly, like I've been studying conspiracy theories a bit more recently in the last couple of years, and certainly one thing I've noticed is that conspiracy theories are a hot academic area. I mean, a lot of sociologists are looking at, why do people believe these weird ideas, but also they're collecting these stories and trying to understand how does it influence power? How does it influence policy? I think even though this stuff is often seen as irrational or illogical, they still have an impact. And I think looking at its political ramifications, its sociological ramifications matters.
Yeah. And that's probably going to be about it for us today. Derek, thank you so much for joining us. That is a great note to end on. This has been a really awesome episode. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Daniel, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.